Hi, I'm Craig Nielsen. I've been in the fire service for 31 years. My associate that I train with, his name's Greg Pascola. Actually came on the department before I did a little bit.
We've been working doing this live fire behavior training for 13 years now. We had a real good friend of ours pass away as a result of a flashover.
One of the recommendations out of the report from that fire was that everyone in our department receive flashover survival training. Our department went out, they found the system that worked best for our department, and that was a Draeger system. We started using that system. We trained 3,500 firefighters in flashover survival.
It's bittersweet. As a result of a death, so many people have benefited. We have prevented serious injury and death from this training, and that's why I have a passion for what I do.
There's several different definitions of flashover. The one that makes the most sense to me, it's the stage in fire development in which the contents and the gases reach their ignition temperatures and flames break out almost all at once over all the surfaces. There are a few different types of flashovers that exist. The NFPA now calls all the different types of flashover rapid fire progress. Those different types, the most common is a hot, rich flashover. That's the most common that firefighters run into on the fire ground. The cause of a flashover, or a hot, rich flashover is what I'm referring to, is a term called thermal radiation feedback. Everything in nature tries to find a balance. If I grab a can of Coke, that Coke's gonna warm up, and my hand in turn is gonna cool off. Same thing's happening inside of a structure. The seed of the fire is growing, the energy and heat that's being created is being absorbed into the material of that room. It's trying to find that thermal balance. Once it can't find that balance, or that balance is exceeded, the material starts to break down, starts to form a gas called carbon monoxide and radiate that heat back to the center of the room. That process is called pyrolysis. Once it reaches the center of the room, it's going to want to try to find a way to go back to the walls, but like a sponge, it can only absorb so much heat. So then that heat then begins to build and build and build until it reaches its ignition temperature, and then it ignites into fire, and you get flames breaking out not only through the gas, but every single surface in that room.
It's all about heat and energy. You have to have heat to break down a solid to a gas, and that's what produces that very volatile gas. And that's what's killing and hurting us this day.
Another type of rapid fire progress, or RFP, is backdraft. That's probably one of the most uncommon types that we encounter on a fire ground. I've only witnessed one in my 33 years of service. And what that is, it's a fire that's generated so much heat and used up all the oxygen in the room that it just sits and smolders and smolders. The heat does not go away, the air is gone, but that superheated gas has been confined, and it's just perking and perking, waiting for us to either open a door, or someone to open a door or let fresh air in. It mixes with all the gas that is in there. The heat is already there, and when it ignites with an explosive force. The other would be a delayed flashover.
A delayed flashover is also very dangerous for firefighters. Picture a house with a fire that began in a rear bedroom. The smoke and energy has traveled throughout the home, filling it with superheated gases. As firefighters enter the home, a hot, rich flashover occurs in the rear bedroom. The sudden increase in temperature is enough to ignite the gases throughout the entire home. Firefighters could be faced with gases igniting all around them, yet the seat of the fire is in another part of the structure.
Rollover is what we kind of call a lean flashover, and that is the gas is just mixing with the oxygen at the level right above the firefighters' heads. In other words, you might have flame all the way up to the ceiling level, but what you're seeing are just the sporadic snakes or wisps of flame that are occurring in the smoke. If you witness rollover, you have seconds before flashover will occur. I think there's some misunderstandings about flashover. It's not so much the flashover event, it's the gases associated with the flashover.
We have very rich, thick, cooler gas down at the floor level where we're working in. And then as we progress up to the ceiling level, we have a much hotter, leaner gas. At the ceiling level, we could actually have gases that are above their ignition temperature, but too lean to burn. And as we go down 18 inches, we get a little bit richer, cooler gas, a little bit richer, cooler gas, and so on as we get to the lower elevation. Right now, if we recognize that we have high velocity smoke, high heat smoke, right when we begin our entrance, we have to start cooling those gases. Years ago, the school of thought was, hey, get in, put the wet stuff on the red stuff. You'd get pushed and pushed and pushed in, and that's how we're losing people. We have to stop that mindset, back up, and start using a straight stream and cool that hot smoke. It's not the fire that's going to get us, it's that smoke. That smoke is like throwing a gallon of gas in the air and suspending it. That's how flammable that gas is.
As often as I've done it, we've actually been able to even accidentally create a flashover on ourselves just because of the wrong nozzle pattern.
If we go in with the fog pattern and we start swirling it around and we mix up these different layers, I guarantee you we're going to create a flash on ourselves if we're in a superheated condition. Now, if we go in with the solid stream of water and we cut through all those different layers of smoke, we're going to be able to project that water up to the upper atmosphere, and we're going to be able to cool that environment. We're going to be able to quench that environment, and we're going to be able to get in and find that seat of the fire or effect a rescue or get ourselves out to safety.
The expansion ratio of steam is 1,700 to 1, and that's at 212 degrees. When I began this training and looking through research, I found that the expansion ratio of water when you put into that atmosphere at 1,128 degrees turns into 4,200 to 1. So now 1 gallon of water translates into 4,200 gallons of steam. Now, if I'm going to put water into that atmosphere and I'm in a nice, tight, confined space, what's that going to do to the environment if I put a lot of water in there? Again, it's going to drive those heated gases down into my environment and possibly bring flashover down upon myself. It's misunderstanding how to use your nozzle as a tool to cool those gases down on the way to the seat of the fire. So it's not really putting water on the seat of the fire, but it's actually squirting water into that smoke layer above your head.
Most of the time, flashover is going to occur on an unvented structure. If we pull up on scene at 2 a.m. in the morning and we have some wispy smoke showing from the eaves, that's not a vented structure. And all our job is to do is to deal with that fire triangle. At that moment, that fire triangle is not complete until we show up on scene. And when we show up on scene and kick in that door, what happens? We allow that air to go in, feed that seat of the fire oxygen, it re-energizes itself, and guess what? We just completed that fire triangle. Now our job becomes we have to break up one leg of that fire triangle.
So if you ventilate horizontally, you can actually accelerate a fire, and that goes for vertical ventilation too. If you do not coordinated attack on the seat of the fire and you vertically ventilate a building, you can actually accelerate flashover into that structure.
We have to have a coordinated effort. The engine company makes entrance, the truck company vertically ventilates or horizontally ventilates in the right location. We allow the gases to vent, and we allow the environment to clear up, and we can attack the seat of the fire a little bit more rapidly. The problem for us if it's done in an uncoordinated process. If the hole's cut too soon, if the glass is broken too soon, then we actually accelerate the velocity of flame, and we actually engage in a much bigger firefight than we had planned on.
Horizontally, if you open doors, windows randomly, you're going to accelerate the growth of that fire if you do not have a hose line in place. Vertically, same thing. If you randomly vertically ventilate a building, you're going to accelerate the fire if you don't have water in place on that seat of the fire. But flashover recognition can start before you even get in your car to go to work in the morning. What type of day do you have? Is it raining? Is it windy? Which direction is the wind coming from? Because all that can have an effect on the way a structure can burn.
We have these environmental issues that we have to deal with on scene, and if we open a door and we have a serious wind at our backs, we're going to pressurize that structure.
Based upon, is the wind at your back, is the wind at your face, you might want to select a different entry portal just because opening that door will super accelerate the growth of that fire if it's wind driven and the power behind it. Generally in the fire service, we like to go from the uninvolved portion of the structure to the involved portion of the structure. So if it was in a rear bedroom, we'd want to make exit through the front door, therefore not pushing or accelerating the fire through the rest of the structure. That's not to say though, if the fire is really coming out of that back bedroom window, we could perhaps soften the structure, soften the target by directing the straight stream through that window to the ceiling level and at least cooling those gases down, knocking the fire down shortly, and then making our attack from the inside.
Hitting it hard from the yard, softening the target. This has been around for several years. It's just now kind of getting refocused right now. If you recognize a certain situation and you know that you have this fire blowing out of a window or blowing out of an opening, go ahead and soften that room. It's okay with that straight stream and a straight stream only, and then make your entrance.
Now, there are some steps a firefighter can take to delay flashover, and that's using your nozzle as a tool. And that is to direct that straight stream up to the ceiling level where it's going to be the most effective, and then rotate it throughout the room so that you don't cool that same spot several times in a row. Not just standing there waiting to get to the seat of the fire, but cooling the gases down appropriately and lowering their ignition temperature so that you could probably reach that seat of the fire or effect a rescue or possibly escape the structure.
That smoke right there, that high velocity, high temperature smoke, travels at about 15 miles an hour. As you get in, and if you have to retreat, you can't crawl faster than 15 miles an hour. And that fire is going to find you before you find it.
The NFPA says a firefighter can travel 2.5 feet a second without a hose line and has 2 seconds to escape if flashover occurs. That translates, if you're more than 5 feet from an exit, you're not going to make it out. Your hose line is going to be your best protection, either going into that building and coming out of that building. So do not leave that hose line behind.
We've had firefighters that were told to retreat and back out of the structure and leave their nozzle. They had no water when they retreated, and they were caught in a flashover and unfortunately perished or seriously injured. And so having that water is our safety net. Having that water to be able to cool that environment, that's what we need. That is so important for us.
It comes to risk versus gain. Again, if we're attempting a rescue, we're trying to save either one of our own firefighters or perhaps a civilian that's reported to be down, we want to take those steps to effect that rescue. And if we have to cool those gases down, we're going to use our nozzle as a tool, drop that ignition temperature, and again, get that rescue effected. Risk versus gain. There are several factors in the development of a flashover. Room size is one of them. The larger the room, the taller the ceiling, the longer it might take for that thermal feedback to occur. There's been cases where it's occurred in less than 4 or 5 minutes. And there's been cases where it takes much longer than that based upon the size of the structure. A firefighter can be faced with 2 different types of construction, an older home and a newer home. The older home tends to have legacy fuels, better construction quality that can actually absorb more heat and take longer to get to that flashover stage. A newer home is constructed now with some synthetics, the material inside, the contents inside, again, synthetics that create a lot more BTUs, and the construction is much more insulated so that thermal feedback can happen a lot faster and you can get to that flashover stage much sooner. There's different timelines when it comes to flashover. Obviously, the size of the room, the size of the occupancy, whatever is involved in fire, how much is burning, what are the contents of that fire, again, the BTUs being generated by synthetics versus legacy fuels now, all have a play on how fast that flashover can occur. In the beginning, you'll see a gradual inclination of the heat. And why is that? Because the material in the room is absorbing as much heat as it possibly can. So the temperature is real gradual in the beginning. Then you get that sudden spike in temperature. And again, that's what we want firefighters to concentrate on or to recognize, is that spike in temperature. It's not a gradual inclination, it's a drastic inclination of the heat. And that's when you'll see that boiling rich smoke start to go across the whole structure. And then once it levels off, flashover occurs, it levels off 1500 degrees before you get to that decay stage. Now, a more modern type of time temperature curve is, you'll see that gradual inclination of heat. And then once that structure runs out of oxygen, the heat will actually diminish and it'll start to go down because it's run out of oxygen. But what do we do as firefighters? We get on scene, we have to get inside to put the fire out, so we open a door, give it that fresh air it needs, and now that spike in temperatures occurs and you get the flashover in just a matter of seconds. Then it levels right off again, 1500 degrees till you get to that decay stage. As
soon as we pull up on scene, we need to start looking at that smoke. whether it's low pressure smoke or high pressure smoke. And if it's emitting from cracks or if it's emitting from openings in that structure, we need to recognize that, whether it's low pressure or high pressure.
You could write a book on smoke recognition because there's virtually a lot of things you can talk about. When it comes to flashover, we're looking at the smoke that has some pressure behind it. Pressure, velocity. That's really what we're focusing on when it comes to identifying the potential of flashover.
And then once we make entry into the structure, we need to identify whether it's a river of low pressure smoke exiting, which tells us that it's rather cool inside that environment and we can get in at a much faster rate, versus high pressure, high velocity, high heat smoke. And that's going to tell us that, whoa, we have to slow down and start making some risk versus gain decisions.
Well, we kind of use the analogy of it's an upside down witch's cauldron. In other words, if you put the heat above, it's boiling the smoke below. And if you see that boiling smoke, or take that witch's cauldron and turn it upside down, that's the type of smoke that's associated with potential flashover. Usually you'll see that effect on the perimeter walls. As you enter into the structure, look to the perimeter walls because the walls will heat up faster before the center of the room. When you get that witch's cauldron effect throughout the whole structure, that's preeminent to flashover. In other words, flashover is going to come in about 4 to 5 seconds. If you look to the center of the room and the smoke is kind of lazy and it doesn't quite have the velocity of your interior walls, you probably have some time to cool the gases and try to get some work done. Just like an EMS incident, flashover has signs and symptoms. So signs are what you can see and feel. First thing, you have high heat. Where are you feeling that heat? Again, that's a sign of flashover. Are you feeling the heat on your shoulders, on the back of your hands, maybe your ears perhaps? Zero visibility. That's not always true. Sometimes you can have great visibility and there can be superheated gases over your head. Firefighters can enter into a building with a large ceiling, perhaps a drop ceiling, and not know that over their head is 10 feet of superheated gas just climbing to its ignition temperature. And when they ignite, they can drive you right down to the ground.
But if we go into a structure and we have smoke all the way down to the floor, which happens quite often, we now have to use our senses. Can I see the seat of the fire? Can I hear the seat of the fire? And can I feel it? If I feel superheat through my PPEs, my protective equipment, I know that I have to start going through those risk versus gain process right now, the decision-making process right now. And I have to start cooling that gas. So if I can't feel heat through my PPEs, I know I'm okay. I know I can start advancing down to find that seat of the fire.
If you're witnessing rollover, that's another sign, something you see. Those are the fingers or the snakes of fire in the smoke above you. Also, you have from the outside looking in, pressurized smoke. That's a real good indication that flashover is imminent. So those are signs. What are symptoms? Symptoms is what's actually occurring on the fire ground that you can't see. Well, if you're getting no or inadequate ventilation on that structure, that heat and energy has nowhere to go, so it continues to build within that structure. Also, if you don't put any water on the seat of the fire, it's going to continue to grow and grow until it reaches an ignition temperature, and then you'll get those flames that break out almost all at once. The Draeger-Swede system is 2 container systems that have been put together. So actually the students are below the simulated 4 level. So they're in a nice, safe environment. We can reach temperatures of 1,500 degrees, but where the students are, it's very comfortable, and we're still able to observe that phenomenon in a nice, safe environment. Okay, as you can see here, we are in the incipient stage of fire development, almost entering the growth stage. As you can see on the right wall, that material has started to break down now from a solid to a gas. In other words, pyrolysis is taking place. Here we see the smoke overhead moving at a relatively low velocity. The heat being generated is not driving that smoke, so we're still in the early stages of fire development here. Now, as the fire is ending into its growth stage, you can see on the perimeter walls how that off-gassing is taking place much more rapidly. And that's because, obviously, your exterior walls and your ceiling heat up and trying to absorb as much heat as it can, heat up much more quickly than the center of the room. And that's where you get this cave type of effect. You tell the smoke is different on the left and the right than in the center of the room. And what do we do on the fire department? We open the door, give it that gulp of breath of fresh air. Again, when I arrive on scene, I look at that smoke and I try to read and diagnose what stage of the fire am I in right now. In this picture, you can see that the firefighters can actually read the smoke once they enter into the building, what's happening overhead, but also watching the fresh air being drawn past them as they make entry. Now here you can see with the door closed how that fire is just starving for oxygen and is drawing that fresh air in through any portal it can, because that's what it's needing. It's needing that fresh air for it to survive. Here again, we're into that growth stage of the fire. The velocity of the smoke is now picking up. In this picture, you can really see the difference between your perimeter walls and the interior, or the center part of that smoke column. Looking up over our head, you can see on the left-hand side the darker, thicker, boiling smoke, and then look at the center of the room. Again, it's increased in its velocity, but it doesn't have that boiling effect that is preeminent to flashover. Here you can see the fingers in the smoke, or the snakes in the smoke. That's rollover. In other words, the oxygen and fuel is mixing to the right level to ignite those gases. Again, you could have rollover occurring over your head, but all you're seeing are the lingering flames right at the smoke level. If you're witnessing that, flashover is imminent. It's coming right behind. And as you see, this room is now being engulfed into fire. Total room involvement, wall to wall, ceiling to floor. It just jumped from 400 or 500 degrees to 1,500 degrees in just a matter of seconds. Looking at this footage, understand that we are below floor level in this Swede simulator in a very controlled environment. Normally speaking, actual structure fire, it's unpredictable, and so it's much different than what you're witnessing here. The new generation of firefighters, I believe, need to get as much live fire experience as possible. Fire departments around the country, it's a good thing. We're not responding to as many structure fires. That's because of fire sprinklers, better fire prevention. So they're just not getting that hands-on experience. So every opportunity they can to witness the different stages of fire development, to actually use your nozzle in a fire situation, they need to take advantage of that as much as possible. I think firefighters are exposing themselves to the flashover phenomenon much more so because we're so well insulated now. We get this false sense of security. We have hoods, our equipment is better. We're so well insulated that we feel almost invincible, and we're getting deeper and deeper now into structure fires, where in the past we weren't so well protected, and when it got too warm, we had to get out of that building. Now we're staying in there too long, we're getting deeper into structure fires, and we're increasing the potential of being caught in a flashover.
At one point, I had 9 firefighters, 3 companies in off of my rig, and as a result of this training, I was able to recognize a really bad condition. I was able to get in the rig and deploy the horn, and they retreated out to safety, and then shortly thereafter it flashed. And I truly believe because of this training, I was able to make an impact on the outcome of this incident.
The goals of rapid fire progress recognition are to teach firefighters the signs leading up to flashover. It's not the flashover itself. We want to identify the signs leading up to that, and that is the changing smoke conditions. We also want to provide firefighters with the nozzle techniques so that they can cool those gases down below their ignition temperature, stave off flashover, to perhaps give themselves time to escape, maybe effect a rescue, find the seat of the fire, get other things accomplished while effectively cooling the gases. Our ultimate goal, we want to save firefighters from injury and death due to flashover. What I'd like to see is every firefighter, either the new recruit or the established veteran, receive this flashover survival smoke recognition training to better, in the future, make risk versus gain decisions.
Fighting for your heart, hoping the white would bring you back to light from